Oh, hello there. I was just doing some research. I was just reading about the Eternals. Just doing some research before this particular podcast and chat about how the mutants will be introduced into the MCU.
You should be more prepared, Manny P. Got me waiting here. I'm just getting in some extra lighting, so it's extra bright.
Well, I've got my light here.
Yeah.
I've currently got it on yellow. Oh, bright. Because obviously the X-Men were split up into two teams during the 90s, the gold team and the blue team. They each covered a different coast. So at the moment, I'm going to represent the X-Men gold team. How are you anyway?
Yeah, I am good. I hope you didn't see what I was just doing.
I did see, and I'm just going to ignore it.
There you go. That's the spirit, Manny. That's why you are ever the professional. I am doing great. It is Saturday afternoon for me. It is now 3 minutes past 1 in the afternoon.
Awesome,
so
awesome.
It's like lunchtime.
We've got two people viewing at the moment. Guys, how are you doing?
Yes, guys. How are you?
Obviously, we're going to be discussing something which I think we're all very excited about, and that is how is the Marvel Cinematic Universe going to introduce the X-Men? Now, not just the X-Men, but the mutants as well, in general. It's fair to say this is quite a loaded topic. Mr. Cato's doing fine. Excellent.
Awesome,
good to hear it.
Awesome, Cato.
Good to hear it. Good to hear it. Which reminds me, whilst I'm talking, I'll get your email up, Dowdy, because Dowdy also sent us a email about this specific subject as well. So I think
so he's been waiting. He has been waiting.
He has been waiting. So I think we'll split this into two different sections, basically. I think there's one question, which is how do we think Kevin Feige and his team will introduce mutants into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? But then there's that second question, how would we introduce mutants into the MCU? So I think those are two different questions, to be fair.
Yeah, but I think you got them in the wrong order.
So which way do you want to go?
I think it should be, how do we think they should introduce it? Because let's face it, fans' opinions, especially when it comes to certain subjects, like we spoke on a previous podcast about when we're speaking about the state of football, where fans' opinion, that's not taken into account how it can have a dramatic effect on us.
So Bavik says, we want Vayermen. We want Vayermen. Hell, here. We want Vayermen. We're here. There's two of us.
Yeah.
Who knows? One day you might get all four of us. Who knows?
Yes. When the timing is right. But yeah, going back to what I was saying, I think fan opinions and ideas are very, very important on these subjects, because we are the ones who's going to be going out and purchasing the product. So therefore, if our ideas, especially when said product is delivered, if it doesn't live up to the expectation, and fans' ideas was probably better, would have been a better, talking point or a springboard for them to use, and they didn't take any of that into account, then it's no different to any other field of topics that we often see where fan opinion just gets blindsided and just totally gets ignored. So I think fan opinion on the theories of how they should go about introducing them, logical ones, of course, will be very, very important, because let's face it, the X-Men movies have not lived up.
No, they haven't. They haven't at all.
And
they've been huge disappointments. Let's not beat around the bush here.
Yeah, now, especially when you look at the success of Avengers and Thor, like, let's face it, all these lesser characters
Thor's
in
not a
terms
lesser
of,
character.
no, don't let me clarify what I meant by that. In the sense that growing up, it was always X-Men, Iron Man, Incredible Hulk. But let's face it,
So every time you
X-Men
say
was
X-Men, are
the,
you going to do that little jazz hands thing,
yes,
which you just
X-Men.
did?
X-Men,
X-Men.
yes, X-Men was always what we always was the focal point. You always had to talk about the X-Men. That was like the in thing. Let's face it, when we were in school, when we were in secondary school and we were talking about, all those times we're in home economics, sitting there, not wanting to listen to Miss Wilkie,
Not
talk
much. Not much.
about, talk about basic oven pizza, ready-made pizza, because that was not real cooking. We just the highlight of the class was what talking about X-Men episodes, and then after you finish going about the main one, then you'll talk about Iron Man and everything else. So to me, X-Men was always the main thing for
Yeah.
us, like X-Men, and then all the others. So to see the others so successful, and X-Men literally is now like them. X-Men has now been relegated, I should say, sorry, to the back, to the lower
Hey,
tier in
it's
terms of that.
the bargain bucket DVDs for me now.
Literally, yeah, literally. It's like, no one cares about the X-Men compared to the Avengers. All everyone's talking about is Iron Man, this, Thor, Captain America. They've gotten the big push because they've been so successful, because they've been done correctly. And I think that's hugely based off the fact that they saw how neglected X-Men were
Yeah.
treated and how bad it did. So therefore they looked at the things that did work for those.
So Bavik's just making a relevant point. Kraft mac and cheese is real food, apparently.
I second that. Trust me, I love Kraft mac and cheese, which I'm actually going to be having some for lunch when I finish here. I love Kraft mac and cheese.
It's amazing.
Kraft mac and cheese is awesome. Thank you, Kraft mac and cheese.
I'm not entirely sure how that's connected to the X-Men conversation we're having.
Hey, X-Men love mac and cheese. You don't know what they have.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. I imagine Gambit makes quite a nice mac and cheese with his
Oh, Gambit will know how to make all those, like, gumbos.
Exactly.
Because he's from New Orleans, it's Cajun food. Cajun food is absolutely amazing. So yes, and we all know Gambit is my favorite X-Men.
Indeed, he is.
Cool.
A good friend of mine named T. They actually told me that Kevin Feige was basically one of the. He actually works on the X-Men movies, but obviously not in any kind of managerial role. And it was actually
he was just there, like intern.
And it was actually basically what he was, and he was the one who actually went to makeup and hairstyling and said, "This is how you need to do Wolverine's hair for Hugh Jackman," and he was the one who basically got the comb out himself and said, "Look, it needs to be long up here, it needs to be spiky out here," and so it shows that Kevin Feige has been passionate about Marvel for years, and he is 100% the right person to take us forward with the mutants.
But looking at that, what does that state? That basically state that he probably had a lot of ideas, but he couldn't actually implement those because he was not who he is now. So therefore, his opinion was not really valued, and he knew if he probably said anything too much, that would probably step on any toes.
Well, from what we now know about Bryan Singer, I don't think he would have taken kindly to any kind of suggestions. He's not a very nice person by the sounds of it.
Right, and that would also lead to him possibly getting rejected from certain jobs because he'd probably get, especially at that time where his name, he isn't a household name per se. So therefore, he would have gotten like, oh, you don't want to work with this guy, he's a troublemaker. So that could have he wouldn't have been able to be in the position that he's in right now.
Yeah.
So sometimes, unfortunately, you have to watch things that you probably love get destroyed.
Oh, yes,
until you're
I know that well.
Until you're actually in a position where you can actually right those wrongs, and then you go and make it correctly. Because I took this very seriously as well. When you told me, we're doing this, and I saw how determined you were with your research, I started doing some research on YouTube because obviously I don't have the luxury of getting any comics based on where I am right now. So I had to go on YouTube and type in theories for MCU, for X-Men and mutants being brought over into the MCU? What are your theories? How will they be introduced and whatnot? And I start taking things.
So, David, let's just get into it. We want to talk about theories and methods which we would use to introduce the X-Men. You go first with a theory.
Well, one of my theories that they could have used was obviously with the...
And we're going to rate these theories as well, to look at the pros, look at the cons within the MCU, and rate how likely it is to happen and how good a theory it is. So in the comments as well, if you want to start listing a few things, go for it.
Yeah. The finger snap. That could have been an actual theory of how they're introduced, because let's face it, that actually reshaped the entirety of the universe.
It's actually one of the things I got written down, so I can tick that off.
Oh, see, and I'm glad I'm actually halfway across the globe from you, so therefore I can't be accused of copying, stealing your ideas. But that literally could be one of the theories of how they're introduced into the MCU.
Okay.
I mean, do you want me to give more, or do you want to go one for one?
Well, I was just going to come in. I was just going to come in now. So I think I like the blip idea, because I think this connects onto another thing quite nicely.
Yeah.
So according to Marvel history, the Celestials, who are very much kind of they seed planets with life, and they decide, what's successful and what's not successful. They created the Eternals and the Deviants as well. Thanos was actually a deviant in the comics.
Yeah.
Not a sexual deviant. I don't think he was that kind of deviant. I'll just put it out there.
He's just a warmonger.
Yeah.
Man of principle in his own way.
Yeah. So evening, Penny. Evening. Good to see you here.
Hey, Penny.
So Bavik says, so Thanos finger snapped the mutants. He's father mutant. Kind of. Possibly. So potentially the mutant gene has always been there within humanity, just waiting to be activated. So maybe the two finger snaps have activated that gene prematurely. Now, we've seen Monica Rambeau's DNA change in WandaVision. So that could have been either connected to Wanda's magic, or it could be connected to the blip. But I think that could be a good way of doing it. I think having the blip activate what's already within humanity anyway, because of the Celestials and the Eternals and all those lot. I think that could work. Go on.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that could work. I think another theory could possibly be the aftermath of Scarlet Witch mental, emotional breakdown, which literally caused her powers to manifest stronger than it did, subconsciously causing her to do a lot of things, like literally reshape reality. Because for the fact that in WandaVision we actually got to see the Flash, Quicksilver from the Fox X-Men into the MCU, it's basically, that's a great segue to show that her power was so out of control that it actually reshaped reality. Or probably just, literally just reshaped reality. And with probably all that cosmic energy lingering around from that snap.
Yeah. So
would have literally, caused like a chain reaction. That with her power, could have just caused an, crazy mutation of sorts, or highlighted mutation. So
I was really a fan of this theory initially, that maybe Quicksilver, the Fox Quicksilver, had kind of been plucked from the multiverse. But then we know that that character is a character in the MCU called Ralph Boner, and he just happens to look like Quicksilver. I hope there is a bit of multiverse aspect to it, but I'm also worried that he's just Ralph Boner as well. So Dowdy says, as I just said, Davie P, you do know that they were trolling us with the Fox Quicksilver. And that's what I believe as well. I think they were just being gits to us, basically, getting us all excited. And they literally gave us a boner for this Quicksilver.
Yeah, but by
which
them
ended up
trolling
not
us,
being followed through on. Bastards.
yeah, but let's face it. Look at this. Look at the theory on this though. It's like, for instance, what the hell is that dude's name? You know, the one who did Man's Not Hot.
Michael Dapper.
You know, the comedian.
Big Shaq.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Big Shaq. Remember, he was literally just trolling. He was just trolling, and it went viral to the point that it actually became a real thing. So by them trolling us with the Fox Quicksilver, the theory of actually her power could actually change reality and literally bring things that was not expected into reality, that could actually be, they could actually use that, but obviously with more intelligent people. Yeah, thanks, Big Shot. With more intelligent people behind the writing could find a way to actually make it make sense. Could I expand on that and make it make sense to actually come through?
Yeah, but Bit of Me doesn't want any of the Fox stuff to be involved in this MCU as well.
But going there now, another one of my theories that I was reading on, Captain America, Wolverine, they're all linked.
Okay, this is another thing I was going to bring up as well, so I could take that one off. Okay, but I mean, let's just exhaust the Wanda theory before we go into that. As I've said in a previous video, I think Wanda is a mutant, and I think they've actually already said that in Avengers Ultron.
Oh, no, she's a damn mutant. That's Magneto's daughter.
Yeah, but we don't know that in terms. We've got to look at it through the prism of what we know of the MCU. And obviously, like, if you're a casual fan, you don't know who Magneto is, potentially, or care. Or you might even know Magneto from the previous X-Men movies, but not know he had children and whatnot. So I think in Avengers Ultron, they do pretty much say she's a mutant. They say that her and her brother had some kind of latent genetic mutation that enabled them to survive the testing they already done. I think she's already a mutant, and I think she will be revealed as a mutant at some point.
Yeah, my only thing is, how would they go about integrating Professor, considering, from what we know, Professor X wrote a book, didn't he, about the mutant and the mutant gene, and he used to give speeches to Congress, to world governments, literally, speaking about things.
But this is the issue. We almost have to clear our minds of all of that's happened in the past. Anything that's happened in the comics or the cartoons, we've got to be very careful what we pick out of those other bits of canon or universe and putting it into the MCU.
Listen, and the reality of it is, I don't care how they do it, as long as they do it right, and X-Men end back up being on top, being the number one.
That's hinted very heavily.
Yeah.
So I think I think Marvel couldn't say she was a mutant because the mutants still belong to Sony, but in Age of Ultron, they pretty much said she was a mutant without, as far as they could go, without getting sued by Fox.
Yeah, see, and that's the silliness of politics, which ruined great shows, because you then had, which is why we had the nonsense where you had Quicksilver for Fox, but no Scarlet Witch, and you had Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch briefly in the MCU, but then he died off because they wanted to leave it so that the Quicksilver for Fox could actually be Quicksilver.
It was an agreement the two studios had.
Yeah. It's the only good thing is that for Fox, they didn't actually kill Scarlet Witch on the Fox brand. You just never saw her. No, remember, she never died. You just never saw her.
I
He just says he's a twin. Remember when Professor met him, when they first met him, he's like, yeah, I'm a twin, but you never saw his sister.
I have
and I
no
don't know who my
recollection
dad
of
is.
any of those movies. I've just erased them
Well,
from my
saying
memory.
that, you know what? That one was pretty good when they went to rescue Magneto. I mean, that was some awesome filmmaking. The scenes with Quicksilver, what he did and whatnot. I mean, they even tried to duplicate it in. They even tried to duplicate it in what's that? In Justice League with their Flash.
So
tried to duplicate just the awesomeness of what Flash, Quicksilver did.
Okay, let's not get into Flashpoint and all that stuff. I don't want the DC fans coming down on me. They already hate me enough as it is. But no, I think the Wonder theories for me is pretty spot on. But let's go back to the Eternals theory and that the Celestials have already implanted the seed, the genetic mutation within humanity already, which just needed to be activated. I think it's quite a good theory, and I'm going to say it's very likely. What do you think? Whilst you're thinking, I'll just read this out. Marvel K, who happens to have the same surname as me. It's my brother, that's why. Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted mutants back to settle with the Inhumans. Absolutely. In season 1, they just supplanted... they just swapped around mutants and Inhumans. From what I understand, though, and what I've been told, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has kind of gone off on a different timeline, so he's no longer considered MCU canon. But yeah, what do you think about the Eternals and that being a likely way of introducing the mutants?
Yes, it makes sense because let's face it, the Eternals are like the all-powerful. They literally watch everything. They just don't interfere.
Yeah, well, that's
But based on what's happened with, I think the way they can introduce the mutants and the reason for the Eternals coming into the fray is to basically say, well, they kind of feel some kind of responsibility and guilt for what Thanos done. So therefore, they've just now letting the world be aware that they do exist. There is a higher power, something far beyond what Avengers, anyone else can actually defeat. And they won't stand back and allow for something like a Thanos incident to happen again.
So apparently the Eternals movie spans 7,000 years, Kevin Feige has said.
Oh, so you mean from their creation, their history up to...
Yeah, so the movie's going to span basically 7,000 years. It's going to be a journey of 7,000 years of their history, it seems. My brother says, not good idea as it makes the mutants as an offshoot of the Eternals. It's a good point. But apparently in the comics as well, that has become canon. It wasn't necessarily the Eternals, but the Celestials who apparently put the mutant gene within humanity. Apparently that's a more recent kind of plot point they've put into the comics. Thanos was an Eternal, but I thought Thanos was a deviant, Kay. I thought he was a deviant, not an Eternal.
Yeah.
Yes, I saw you were saying.
The Eternals are the all-powerful, isn't it?
No, the Celestials are the all-powerful.
The Celestials are, and then you've got the Celestials created the Eternals.
Pretty much, yeah. So they created the deviants first, and they were like, "Oh, we don't like these guys." So then they created.
Yeah, and then they created the Eternals.
Yeah,
and not because there was like a big war, wasn't it, between the Eternals?
By the way, when we say Eternals, we're not referring to the really bad '90s R&B group. Yeah, we're not referring to them. But yeah, and we've already seen the Celestials twice in the movies. We have seen Celestials mentioned in Guardians of the Galaxy, and actually one of the bases they go to in Guardians of the Galaxy is actually a big celestial head. So I think we will see more of the Celestials in
Yeah, and
into the Eternals.
Star-Lord's father is he's one of the Eternals.
No, he's just a big planet called
What
Ego.
was he then?
He's just a big living planet.
But he's linked to either the Eternals or the Deviants.
Give me a second. Oh, God. Oh, Jesus. Okay, look what I bought. It's a hardback edition of those comics he used to have.
Jesus.
Jesus, indeed. It weighs a ton.
Yeah,
So,
look.
By the way, there's a picture of Ego there from the 1980s. Looks nothing like Kurt Russell. This is heavy, this book. Oh, God.
Yeah, that's his natural form. It's only when he came to Earth, you know.
Yeah.
I think he wanted to go for Kevin Bacon, but he chose Kurt Russell instead.
E, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. David, talk to the people.
Yes, people. So, going back to what I want X-Men to be back to being number one. Number one in the Marvel Universe. I grew up on X-Men. You know, I grew up a Gambit Wolverine fan. You know, absolutely loved it. So
okay.
I'm definitely looking forward to
okay. So according to the Marvel Encyclopedia, there's Ego again. That's a nice picture of Ego. There you go. It's really heavy, this book. Ego, the living planet, originated like any other planet, coalescing over millions of years from cosmic gases and dust. Hopefully not methane. But unlike any other known planets, Ego developed consciousness and intelligence. So yeah, he's just a big planet.
Yeah, but that's contrary to one of the that may be right. One of the theories I was reading on, it did say something that he was.
Oh, here we go. Ego in the MCU claims to be celestial. Oh, does it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because I saw that on one of the videos I sent you.
Oh yes. No, Thanos is the half brother of Star Fox, isn't he? Who's an Eternal. It's a good point. A few more comments. So it's going to be another 20 years till Mutants actually make it into the MCU. It's not going to be that long, Davik. It might be 2 or 3 years, but it's not going to be that long. I'm not showing off. If I was showing off, I would have handled that book with a lot more strength. The Holy Marvel Bible. Yes, it is.
Literally, you know, he wants to perform an exorcism. He goes, let me see. Who's he saying? Sabertooth? Let me go to S.
To be fair, if I was committing a seance or exorcism, sorry, not a seance, I'll just hit the person with this book. I think that would pretty much deal with any issues.
Yeah, that will compel all demons that's in that person. Is Gambit in that book?
Yes, no, he's not. No. Gambit wasn't. This was made in the 80s, so Gambit isn't a. So Gambit wasn't a character at that point. Gambit was introduced a bit later, but yeah, I think the Eternals idea is quite good with the Celestials kind of playing a role in the Mutants formation. There are rumors that the Mutants are going to feature in the Eternals, so I'm going to give that rate. I'm going to give that an 8 out of 10.
That one. You know, sticking to that theory, what you said about the mutants being introduced in the Eternals, that was actually one of the theories that I was actually watching up on.
Sorry, Bavik skied as well that Gambit's not in there. Sorry, Gambit, I think my brother might be able to help me out here. I think Gambit was the early 90s when Gambit first popped into the Marvel comic universe.
The coolest character ever.
There needs to be a New Testament called Gambit 1482.
I second that. Here.
They've actually done some pretty bad things to Gambit in recent years. Yeah, it was the 90s Gambit was introduced. But yeah, out of 10, what would you give that rating for the Celestials theory?
You mean the Eternals?
Celestials and Eternals.
I will give that a 10 out of 10. Reason being,
So you think it's definitely going to happen?
Yes, one of the theories that I read was that what they're planning to do, the MCU is planning to do, is reintroduce the X-Men, but do it as they did with all the Avengers characters.
My brother's not having this. It's a -7. Okay, could you type up, please? So exactly how do you think the X-Men will be introduced?
No, that's not a -7. That's a 7 minus. -7 would have been the minus in front of the 7.
Probably. Also, my brother has an A-level in maths as well, so I'm not going to argue with him.
No, but sticking to what I'm saying.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, but Shannon Tatum can't act, and even Shannon Tatum said that.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that, and I thought to myself, God, please don't let that happen, because Gambit's been through enough already. I thought the guy who played Gambit in X-Men Origin Wolverine was pretty cool. It's just that the movie wasn't as great as it should be, but he was cool. Also, the same guy who played Sabretooth in X-Men Origin Wolverine, he was the perfect Sabretooth. He actually did the character justice. He was menacing. No, think about it, man.
I can't remember. I honestly cannot remember anything from those movies. They're so bad.
He's the one that plays that. He's in that series what's it? Ray something and Son. It's a series on Sky.
I don't know, but shall we get back to X-Men?
He's a good actor, but in terms of the X-Men, they're saying that one of the theories that they're going to be introducing them the way they, like all the Avengers characters were being introduced, where
one by one,
each one of these movies, at the end clip you'll get to see. So one of the theories is that at the end of it, Marvel Eternals, there will be a revelation of a Marvel character. X-Men character. Not sure which one, but sticking on that theory, the next Thor movie that's coming out, Love and Thunder, one of the theories that at the end of that, they're going to introduce Storm.
Okay, so let's just stop you there.
The first one.
Let's just rewind a little bit. Give a rating as well for if you think the blip is going to be partly responsible for the genetic mutation, because I think that can also.
No, I don't think it's going to be responsible for the mutation. I think it's going to be responsible for, just the craziness of the of the world changing.
Sorry, that's a hot take. They weren't bad. Referring to the X-Men movies, the MCU stuff just overshadowed it due to advances in technology. I don't know. I think the writing as well also took huge advancements as well.
Yeah, and the casting, because come on now, where they went wrong was when they bloody did X-Men and had Vinnie Jones playing Juggernaut.
Yeah,
that was a absolute dookie storm.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I had to forget the movies. Yeah, but so the blip, how much of a likelihood are you going to give that as playing a role in?
Yeah, the blip, I'll give it an 8 for playing
an 8. Okay,
I think it will have an impact on what's happened.
Cool. In the comments as well, what do you guys think? Do you think the blip plays a part in the mutant gene being activated? So let's go back onto Storm. So there's a rumor that Storm is going to feature in Love and Thunder. Daddy gives it a 7. Bavik says that was just comical. What part? The Vinnie Jones stuff. Yeah, that was comical.
Yeah, the Vinnie Jones. Yeah, that was.
Yeah. So in the comics later on, which is a bit after I stopped collecting, a team is kind of built around all the people who can wield Force Hammer, and Storm is one of them. So yeah, the movie as well is called Love and Thunder. Even though Thunder refers to Thor, Thunder can also quite easily refer to Storm as well.
But if I remember correctly, Manny, didn't them two dislike each other?
Who?
Thor and Storm.
I don't remember them having much interaction in the comics, in all fairness.
I remember hearing something of that. Basically, because he's like Thor, the god of thunder, and Storm literally is like the goddess. Some refer to Storm as the goddess. So I heard that they had a little issue.
Possibly. Just like who wears the title better.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that would be good if they introduce the mutants one by one. If there's always been this school there with mutants, then you've got to ask yourself questions like, why weren't they at the Battle of New York? Why weren't they at all these other events that have taken place in the MCU and not helped the Avengers, all these moments? So I quite like the idea that they're quite a disparate group and there's not that many of them.
It could be, this is just a crazy idea, but it could be going back to the Eternal theory, where the Eternals had actually not let any of the mutants per se got involved in that, because it would be as if like they were also getting involved in it. That would somehow reveal their hand in it somehow. So maybe they probably just kept them. So they weren't, they didn't disappear during the blip. They were just outside that whole entirety realm of everything, based on the powers of the Eternals. The Celestials, I should say. The Celestials. And their power is so vast and so unmatched that they could do that without them even realizing that anything has happened. So it could be a case that they actually took them away, literally, and everything seems to be going normal to them, as if everything is just day to day, but what's really happening is completely different from where they are. But they were completely, because their power is so vast, not even the most powerful mind, i.e. Professor X, could even think or actually realize that anything is wrong. Because his power is like literally nothing compared
I'm just going to tidy up the theory around Thanos. 1 second. It's got to his page.
Listen, it doesn't matter who they say Thanos is. At the end of the day, Thanos is that guy who literally, when all the Avengers came, they're all powered up and stuff. Thor with his new weapons and his hammer, Captain America feeling powerful, Iron Man feeling himself, and Thanos literally was that guy just sitting there, literally like a casual Sunday afternoon, not giving a damn how many of them coming towards him, because he was literally ready for that smoke. So to me, that was like the greatest scene, one of the greatest scenes ever. Just the simple fact that Thanos was not moved. He didn't call for any backup. He didn't care for nothing. He literally just sat there. He was so confident in his power and in his ability that he was like, yep, I'll take on all three of you who claim that you are the best, and I'm going to beat you down just to break your will without any additional help.
Yeah. So it actually seems like Thanos is more celestial than a deviant. Just reading this.
Yeah, I could see that. It could be like where they could say, he's a celestial, but he was probably banished. And
eternal, not a celestial. So an eternal, I get those two mixed up all the time. An eternal, not a celestial.
Yeah, so he was created by the celestial.
Yeah. And
he probably was exiled and his power was greatly diminished, but he was still, compared to regular Skrullers and others, he was like more powerful. Hence why he was able to use the Infinity Stones without being injured until he used it multiple times.
So people wondering what the Celestials look like. That's the Celestials, but they are absolutely massive.
Yeah, they're like Titans.
Yeah, well, be careful saying that as well, because Thanos is a Titan, because he comes from the planet Titan. Okay. In the comics, he was in love with Death. Yes, Thanos was in love with
Yeah,
Death. The being, yeah.
yeah, I read that, and he literally tried and he's tried and he's shot so
Yep.
many times, and it was no luck because she actually had a thing for Deadpool.
Death. The thing for Deadpool.
Yep,
God, that must be when it got weird in the noughties. But
yep,
actually,
she liked Deadpool.
but in the comics, the Infinity War actually begins because Thanos is trying to impress Death so much. I'm going to give you all of
Yeah,
these dead bodies. Unpopular opinion: Zemo's butler, also known as the power broker, who created mutants. Maybe. I've got to
yeah,
say, I
he
will
may
feel,
be a celestial in disguise.
I will feel shortchanged if that happens. I have to say, indeed. But yeah, I quite like the blip theory as well. Another, I'm going to come back to the Captain America super soldier theory in a second. But the other thing I want to cover as well, the multiverse. And the multiverse being a method to bring mutants in. I personally don't want that to happen. I think it will, for me, it will just feel a bit messy. Having
Yeah,
an entire like species of people coming in from a different universe into this
yeah,
one,
from a
it will
different
feel
Earth, yeah,
weird.
to this one, yeah.
Yes, therefore there was an unbalance. Yeah, so for some reason in the 90s there was this weird theory going around that there were more people alive today than had ever died. That theory has since been proven to be wrong, but yeah, and that's what the entire Infinity War was built around. That Death needed to correct this balance and have an equal number of alive people and dead people. And because Thanos had his little crush on her, he thought, "Oh, I'll do it for you," like a little simp. He carried out Death's plans for her.
Well, that's what I'm saying with the theory with the Thanos, the love triangle with the Thanos and Deadpool and Death. It was saying that's one of the things why Deadpool is able to die because Thanos basically kind of like got the last laugh because he was spurned. He's like, "Yeah, I'm never gonna let this guy die, so he can be with her."
Yeah, I really don't like
And then,
I really don't like the angles they took a lot of these stories in the noughties. But that's an entirely different kettle of fish. Yeah, I'm just googling the Deadpool death stuff now. It's weird to look at. It's definitely weird to look at. But yeah, so the multiverse. How do you feel about the multiverse?
no, I wouldn't like that because, like I said, again, it would be like you got all these outsiders who's not from your earth and they come in there now want to tell you this and tell you that. And then where will it end? Because if there's doppelgangers for us, like there's another version of us on each world, on each earth, then in theory, that Iron Man from that earth could come back here. And you don't want Iron Man because they basically want to move forward now. Iron Man is basically dead, and that's the end of that. So therefore, you can't do that multiverse theory unless you're planning to bring Tony Stark back.
Yeah, I agree. I think you'll just get a bit. I don't like cross-dimensional stories anyway. And as my brother said, it'll kind of get a bit like the DC Crisis stories they had. And I've never read them. I'm sure they're great. But yeah, I like my stories nice and linear. I don't want them jumping all over the shop.
Yeah, the only good thing about the DC theory was just the fact with you have the Justice Lord as opposed to the Justice League where the Justice Lord actually kills, where Superman kill people and he don't give, he's just vicious. That's the only good thing that came out of that. But apart from that, it's like, no, Marvel needs to, whatever they're doing, don't care how long it takes, make the right films that will introduce these characters the right way so it can work because you don't want to end up like DC be a laughing stock The only good thing about DC right now is their animated movies.
Yeah.
That's all everyone says, just their animated movies. Everything else is just a joke. Because their new Batman, I know we're supposed to be talking about mutants, but for instance, DC's new Batman, which is going to be starring what's the pale dude, the vampire dude.
I don't know.
What's his name? Oh my god, from the Twilight movie, Robert Pattinson. That's it. His Batman is basically not from our Earth. Apparently, it's going to be from Earth 23, so it's a different Earth.
Again.
So that's why again you have too many conflicts where you're going to have this person, this version of that character, while you're still making movies with current version from this universe. So it's going to be too much to do this multiverse nonsense. So just think of a nice way. They need to just think of a nice way. Look at, like I said, which goes back to our original first two questions. Look at fan opinions. Thank you. Yeah, Robert Pattinson. Look at fans' opinions and theories and see what is actually really good and then take it from there.
Yeah,
because
I mean,
that can actually work.
To be fair, I mean, I trust Kevin Feige to do the right thing. The one person I do want him to pluck out from the multiverse is Deadpool. That is the one, obviously, the Ryan Reynolds Deadpool. That is the one character I think we can all agree should be transported into the MCU.
Yeah, oh yeah, there's one of the theories that I read up. It does states that he's going to be coming into the MCU.
Yeah, so that's the one character which... So it'll be interesting to, like, if you did have Deadpool come in and he meets the MCU version of the X-Men and he'll be, like, comparing, like, the X-Men he's met in the Fox world to the X-Men he's now meeting in the Disney world. I think that could produce some good comedic moments.
But that's a great thing. I think that's already a likely theory that's in effect right now. Reason being is what they're saying from the theories that I was reading up, like, you know, the ones that I sent you about, you know, the X-Men, you know, going forward with the X-Men. It basically, one of the theories where it stated was they're going to bring some of the lesser characters as well as a few of the well-known characters. That's going to be the X-Men that's going to be on the front line battling. And then you're going to have other X-Men that we don't really get to see. They're going to be based at the school.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the Fox X-Men, well, with the Deadpool, based just on the Deadpool, forget the other X-Men movies, just based on Deadpool, you didn't get to see a lot of the X-Men. If you look at it, it was only 2 of the X-Men you really got to see inside of the Deadpool movie, which was Colossus. Oh yeah, of course, Colossus, and what's the little
was it? Megasonic Warhead.
Yeah, Megasonic. Yeah, which he loved. That was the only 2 that you actually saw.
Okay, just getting back onto it. Kay says Cable changes the timeline to bring the mutants to the MCU.
No, not Cable. Deadpool, because remember, Deadpool actually had the time shift thing from Cable.
Yeah, but what my brother's saying is that Cable's a time traveler as well. It's essentially what he's saying. The trouble with that is, Kay, is that the way they've established their physics, it seems, for time travel is that if you do change the timeline, you just create, it seems, an entirely different timeline. So if Cable or Bishop or any of those guys from the future did come back, in theory, they will then create a new timeline, which doesn't necessarily mess with the timeline we're currently in. I think the Loki series is going to explain this a lot better than what I can, because I don't purely understand it myself. But that's the way I understand it, though I do like that. I do like the idea that Cable plays a role in it as well. But yeah, I don't want the multiverse. But let's move on to Super Soldiers. Fox really did mess up Days of Future Past massively.
And that was such an awesome. Do you remember when that came out in the 90s, Manny?
In the cartoons?
Yeah, it was a 5-part. It was a 5-part episode.
Well, the comics. It's one of the greatest comic stories ever written.
It was absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved it when that came out. You know,
But
Days of
this is the sad thing Fox have done as well. They've ruined Days of Future Past and they've ruined the Phoenix Saga. Two stories I'd love to see in the cinema, but I feel as though Kevin Feige might think, you know, people have already seen these two stories and they weren't well executed. We're going to have to tell different stories.
Well, no, not really. They could redo the stories that it worked, because look at it. How many times, you know, going back to Batman, how many times have Batman been told over and it's worked? Some of the cases didn't work, you know, like Batman Begins, you know, in 2006, that worked, and they told the story again from start from a different perspective, but same story. You can just add more detail, remove certain things from there, and it can actually work. So I think they can do it. And I think the greatest thing what they're going to do right now also is recasting all the X-Men characters, you know, the actors who are going to be playing the X-Men characters.
Need to see the Morlocks Massacre. I'm going to get onto this. I'm going to get onto the Morlocks.
You know what? That was actually one of my theories that I actually written down.
Me too. I've got Morlocks written down.
The Morlocks was
okay. Let's just one thing at a time. Let's not get all too desperate.
K, well, let's go to K first, because he said it before we did.
Okay, let me start off with my Morlocks theory.
No, you can't do that. K is older than you, and he said it first. Just because you're the Duke don't mean that you should bully everyone, Duke.
Yes, and I'm his little brother, so that means I get to speak on his behalf. So this is my theory, which I'd love to see, and I don't think this is going to happen. But I would love to have a situation where during the blip, there were a lot of mutants who had possibly had the mutant gene activated. And as we've seen, there was like a lot of things going on with refugees. And the mutants, a lot of them were forced underground to live in the sewers of America or the sewers of New York, much like where the Morlocks lived in the comics. And they were basically like cast aside, much like we saw the refugees during Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
And there were a few of them who maybe Professor X picked up and just brought to his mansion, the ones he could find, maybe the ones who he could take in without bringing too much attention to himself to train. But yeah, I think that would be really good. Actually, the Morlocks have been underground for the past 5 years anyway. And they've just been hiding, and then something happens which causes the Morlocks to come to the surface. What do you think?
You know what? Because that also brings one of the next theory that they were talking about, which is the introduction of Mr. Sinister. Now remember, Mr. Sinister, didn't he send Gambit and some others to go and massacre the Morlocks?
So basically, what Mr. Sinister done, he basically wanted to purify the mutant gene. So he saw the Morlocks as kind of like, oh God, it's a terrible thing to say, but he kind of saw them as kind of like dirty in the mutant gene pool, and he wanted them wiped out. So he created a team called the Marauders. You later find out it was actually Gambit who put the team together. Boo, Gambit. And they send the Marauders into the Morlock tunnels and basically massacre about 90% of their population. It's probably the first comic I read in which I cried reading it, because it had.
But he tried to stop them.
He did, after he realised what was going on. It was like, oh, yeah, exactly. God, so what have I done?
He wasn't aware what was going to happen.
But yeah, that's enough fanboying over Gambit. Just back onto the Morlocks. So they wipe out all of these Morlocks, and it's some of the most upsetting comic panels I've ever read in my entire life, easily. And it gets to the Marauders also take out a lot of the X-Men as well, physically. I remember they mess up Shadowcat. Shadowcat gets messed up in that fight. Angel, he's part of a group called X Factor at that point, and they actually harpoon his wings to the wall, and he loses his wings. Basically,
that's before he became Archangel.
Yes, and after that is why he becomes an Archangel. And there was one other mutant as well who got pretty badly, X-Man, who got messed up as well during the fight. And Thor comes down to see what's going on, Thor is so upset and so horrified by what he sees that he actually kills one of the Marauders because he's literally witnessing genocide taking place in front of his eyes. It is honestly.
Who are the other members of the Marauders?
Oh God, who were the Marauders? There was one called Blockbuster who just had loads of muscles. Sabretooth was one of the Marauders as well.
Who?
Sabretooth. He was a Marauder. There were about 8 of them.
Because he is psycho.
Yeah, there were about 8 of them. They were all like pretty much small characters. So my brother says, well, maybe Spider-Man, No Way Home, the multiverse brings the mutants. Possibly. We could have Frog. Yeah, this was a story in the 80s where Thor is turned into a frog called Frog. And yeah, it's a strange story. Not one of my favorite stories, I have to admit. But it was an interesting story.
The coolest frog.
But yeah,
got powers and he speaks ancient.
So you mentioned Mr. Sinister. I would love to see Mr. Sinister be the cameo in the Eternals.
Yeah, Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister is seriously an underrated character.
He's my favorite mutant bad guy.
Yeah. Do you remember the episode in X-Men where, and this was way into the X-Men 90s series when they did an episode on Mr. Sinister.
On his history.
The backstory of that was such a cool thing because he was narrating it at the same time, and you got to see him as just like a regular doctor, and his wife was sick and everything else. That was an amazing.
That's it. Sorry, my brother just says it's the frogs who tell Thor about the Morlocks. Yeah, so the frogs are actually in the tunnels whilst the Morlocks are being massacred, and they go to Thor and say, "There's a genocide taking place in the tunnels. He needs to go and sort this out." So yeah, sorry, Nathaniel Essex, I think was Mr. Sinister's real name.
Yeah, I think what they need to do, they need to watch those episodes. Forget the
David, it's okay. Kevin Feige knows all this stuff. Don't worry about that. He's got every single bit of source material ever created.
And they need to, and what they need to do, they need to get actors who know their program, know their stuff. I don't just want someone who's going to come and just read the script. I want someone who's going to be able to put the effort in and know. Like, for instance, the series that Invincible.
I haven't watched it yet.
But the actors, the voice actors, one of them said he had read the comics, all 144 of them, like many years ago. And then during the pandemic lockdown, he rewatched them again. So you need someone who's going to appreciate the art of what they're actually doing, not just someone who's just going to come there where you can see like the lackluster effort, what they put in. Like for instance, Chadwick Boseman, you could tell he actually did his stuff on Black Panther. Yeah.
So brother says, what about the Brood? Do you know the Brood are, Davian?
The Brood.
So the Brood, they're not a wrestling faction comprising of Edge, Christian, and Gangrel.
And
they're basically an alien race. They look a lot like the aliens from the movie, actually, but they're kind of like, I don't want to say cockroaches, but they're kind of like giant bug type aliens who are just very nasty. They're just a very nasty alien race, and they're one of the X-Men's main enemies. But they'll be an interesting foe for the X-Men, especially if we're going to be entering a kind of more galactic themed X-Men Marvel Universe. Sorry, later. But I was just going to say, just imagine it, Davian. At the end of the first Avengers movie, the after credit scene was this image of Thanos just looking at the camera slyly, and you knew that was the big villain for the upcoming movies. Imagine if they'd done something similar in the Eternals, and it just cuts away and you just see Mr. Sinister with his shiny little face just grinning at the camera. That'd be amazing.
I think what would make it cool is if they introduce him where you get to see the shadow of his costume. It's got them things. And then it turns to the ribbons that kind of poke up out of his. Yeah, then it turns to his face and you see the little diamond thing in his forehead and just this sinister looking face, and then he laughs and that's the end of it.
I've always said if I was going to be cast in the MCU, I'd love to be cast as Mr. Sinister. I think I'd make an amazing Mr. Sinister.
Yeah, until Cyclops come and bust your ass.
It's okay. It's okay. It's fine. He may beat me in a fight, but Mr. Sinister always wins the wars. It's fine.
Yeah, only because Cyclops didn't kill him. Cyclops would just, do a Superman, or a Batman attack but never kill. He never, it wasn't a Wolverine. If Wolverine was able to kill him, he would have been done and dusted.
So let's actually get back onto that. So a good way to introduce Wolverine would be carrying on from that Isaiah Bradley story, which they introduced in Falcon and Winter Soldier. So in the comics, Wolverine, one of Wolverine's names is Weapon X.
An X, yes.
So the X actually, my brother used to have this really cool Weapon X T-shirt back in the day. You probably still don't. You probably haven't got it anymore, I imagine. But yeah, so Weapon X basically meant the 10th version of the Super Soldier.
Of the Super Soldier. Yeah, that was one of the theories that I was reading on.
Yeah, so essentially, I think it would be really cool if there were a few mutants who kind of mutated early throughout history, like Wanda, like Petro, mutated early. And I think it would be really cool if actually after Isaiah, they found this mutant who had this healing capability and they experimented on him as well. And I think that would be a really cool way to kind of introduce Wolverine, but not introduce him straight away as one of the X-Men.
Yeah. 100%, because that is one of the theories that I actually read on there. And it even spoke about
yes, they did actually. Sorry, I was going to say they did retcon that later. That actually Logan does actually fight in the Second World War with Steve Rogers in the comics.
Yeah, but I remember you told me once years ago about an incident between Wolverine and Iron Man, like Captain America's funeral or something.
Oh, that was all to do with Civil War.
Yeah, and he said if he found out he had anything to do with it.
Yeah, that was all to do with Civil War. That wasn't historic or anything like that. But yeah. So yeah, I'd personally love that if, like, following on from the Isaiah Bradley story, bang, suddenly they investigate a bit further, maybe even in the Captain America 4 movie, and I'd love it if they stumble across some kind of Wolverine, not necessarily Wolverine himself, but some kind of reference to Weapon X.
Yeah, literally, like when you go into the archives, you get to see, like, all these schematics of what they were doing, and you get to see, like, a skeleton, like maybe like a like a design, like blueprint of a human, bones being
laced with adamantium.
Laced with metal, and you could see, but you don't see anything else. You just see that, which would make us know, oh God, that's, and that one would be like the Weapon X program. So you'd know exactly who Weapon X is. You don't get to see the name of the subject.
And you could also have, like, maybe a story, for example, where Bucky talks about, when I was Winter Soldier, I came across this guy who had claws and we got into a tussle and he kicked my ass and I was lucky to get away with my life.
That was the first time I lost my metal arm.
Yeah. I've lost lots of metal arms over the years. But yeah, I think that would be a really cool way. So I think we're establishing quite a nice way of how potentially it could happen. We could have the mutant gene already within humanity, potentially the blip activating the mutant gene. Yeah, and then
I think this subject is too vast to do it over one podcast. I think we have to have a part 2 on this, mutants into the MCU theory, because, just with all these conversation and these ideas that we have bouncing off, I'd love to go and do another week of research as opposed to a few days.
Yep, we can do that.
With all the theories, because it is going to be literally, that will be a big part of the phase 4 thing, because because one of the things that I was reading also in the theory where it says was it will possibly lead up to an Avenger type Endgames battle,
Yeah,
over the course of all these movies, with the X-Men and whatnot.
yep,
I think it was alluding to the whole X-Men versus Avengers.
yeah, which could happen. I think would be a great way for these stories to go. So, my good friend Mr. Cato, he emailed me a few of his theories. So I'm just going to read them out and tell me what you think. So he says mutants have always been there in the background. They've always been doing their thing. We just haven't seen them. So, like how you saw, for example, in Endgame, when they went back to the Battle of New York, and actually Ancient One was there fighting the Shatari. Maybe the mutants were actually in the background all along as well. And maybe the mutants were actually fighting the Chitauri as well in New York, but we just never saw it. They just had their own little battle going on in the corner.
Yeah, because remember,
the only just one more bit. The only concept this is how comes mutants have been hidden for so long?
Because of Professor X. Remember, he used to do that quite regularly, wasn't it? Where he would wipe, whole cities, minds from any memory of what took place. So that could be the case, and he's powerful enough where he could actually do that.
Yeah, absolutely. He could alter. He could alter memories. My brother's excited about the prospect of an X-Men versus Avengers.
Of course, Team X. That would be such. Think about it. The PR for that. Literally. They're going to be asking. Are you Team Avengers or Team X-Men? And that will be.
Yeah, Davie likes the idea that he can believe that the X-Men have always been there. We just haven't seen them.
Yeah, because of Professor X, he's been using his power to just because he saw how much destruction and how the aftermath from the whole Avengers Civil War, everything.
Brother agrees. Professor X, he could just put on Cerebro and just
put on Cerebro and just do his thing.
Just wipe a few memories. And stuff. God, I've lost the tab. Second theory from Mr. Cato. Wanda does another hex spell that covers the world, and obviously she's now learning more spells from the Darkhold, and changes or unlocks some of the DNA in some people who have the latent mutant gene, and basically speeds them up into becoming mutants, a lot like what Monica Rambeau, what happens to her in WandaVision.
No, I can't see that one. Reason being with the whole, the fact that Magneto, Professor X, they're older than her. They've been in their powers a lot longer for her, not to mention Wolverine, all those people. So it wouldn't go, considering that's her daddy as well. And her daddy's one of the most powerful mutants.
Yeah, but she doesn't, remember, she doesn't know her daddy yet.
Yeah, so then it would be impractical for her to be the one, for her now arguing with daddy. Daddy, don't talk nonsense to me, yeah? I made you. I gave you your power. I can take it just like that.
That's a good point. But I think it's a nice theory as well. My brother didn't like that theory.
Yeah.
No.
Think about it. X-Men is going to be scrutinized and it's going to be dissected so much. So therefore, if there's any theory that just seems just so out of touch, it's going to already be like, oh, there we go. It's just like Fox movie again. So you don't want anything, X-Men has to come back stronger than everything else to basically erase the memories of the Fox X-Men and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like Spider-Man. When Spider-Man came out, with Tobey Maguire in 2003, that completely erased the nightmare of those poor people who had to endure the 60s. Was it in the 60s they made that Spider-Man?
70s.
Yeah, the 70s.
70s and 80s.
Yeah, the 70s and 80s with the ropes. That was web. So it took over two decades for people to erase that.
to correct that wrong.
And erase it from memory. Yeah.
So just to back up, Mr. Cato, because I do actually think I don't think it's the worst theory in the world.
No, it's not. Oh, it's not the worst, but it's just nah.
There's a comic book premise for that theory in terms of that House of M story, where Wanda utters the words "No more mutants," and 90% of the mutants lose their powers in the Marvel comic universe. So I think what Dowdy's kind of alluding to is kind of like reverse House of M situation, where maybe she feels so lonely being one of the few mutants on the planet, she creates more people like herself. Because she's suffering from a lot of trauma. And she does crazy things, that Wanda, when she's upset. Crazy things.
All she needs to do is just reverse time and go see Vision.
Oh, God. Well, there's still a white Vision knocking around somewhere.
Exactly. Who's now got the memory of dead Vision?
Yeah, so she could easily just go and hook up with that white Vision if she wants. There's a third theory.
It's still him, and just create your own future from there onwards.
Yeah, there's a third theory. The next big Avengers event is going to be a Secret Wars type event, which is a story from the comics, where all the multiverses are collapsing. And to solve it, someone like Wanda or one of the other magicians kind of joined the different bits of the different universes together to basically create like a mishmash of all the different universes within one universe. The one con of that theory is that it's a little too similar to the Arrowverse and the Flash TV show as well.
Even just that. It's just the fact that with the Celestials around, they wouldn't allow a mere mortal to have so much power, and who could do all of that. And I think it just goes.
To be fair, they allowed it to happen in the comics, the Celestials. They didn't have, when the Secret Wars event happened, then they didn't have much saying what was going to happen.
Yeah, I just don't want Scarlet Witch getting too much power like she's all that, because she ain't. Yeah,
and my brother says as well, that is just the crisis on Infinite Earths again. I didn't enjoy that particular story in the Marvel Universe. It was probably one of the stories that put me off buying comics for a while. I personally wouldn't want to see the mutants come in to the Marvel Universe like that. I much prefer they've always been there, or they've just been activated because of the blip or something. Yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
They have to be careful with this Wonder and how much power they're giving her, because then it will be very much nonsensical for her to act as powerful as she is, because then someone would just say, you know what? Since in the MCU you've got Ant-Man, Ant-Man had that, was able to, with the help of Iron Man, they were all able to, travel back in time. Now when she's so powerful, she could easily go and visit Ant-Man, travel back in time, now that she's all super powered, and go and defeat Thanos.
So just show a picture of Scarlet Witch while you're talking.
Yeah, I remember Scarlet Witch. Remember, that's how, which was pretty cool, that they actually let her wear that costume as a Halloween costume in WandaVision.
Yeah. So, just hit myself in the neck with the book. Ouch. I think the MCU is setting up actually Scarlet Witch to be the next big bad in the Marvel Universe. If you want me to be perfectly honest, I think she might.
I think you're right in the sense it will lead to exactly what we were talking about. Eventually lead to the old Avengers versus X-Men.
Thank you for reminding me about Marge Report. We'll get back onto that. Let's just cover Scarlet Witch. Yeah. So you were saying Scarlet Witch. Or you can look at your phone.
No, I'm listening to you.
I'm waiting for you to talk. Okay, so
I'll do some more added research. Repeat that question.
So what I was going to say was, a good friend of mine, he said that shouldn't Wanda feel a bit, shouldn't she feel a bit abandoned by the Avengers? Because it feels like all the Avengers have gone off and done their thing, whereas in the aftermath or Endgame, she was just left to her own devices to mourn by herself. What if we have a situation where Wanda becomes so powerful, but at the same time, she finds a kind of refuge with the X-Men, people who are like her, and ends up hanging out with the X-Men. But then she becomes so powerful, the Avengers feel as though they need to do something about Wanda. And that's what kind of leads to Avengers versus X-Men. A situation where the Avengers want to take care of Wanda, but the X-Men, because she's one of them, feel as though they need to protect her. I think that could be a really interesting story.
Yeah, it could be. And the reason why that actually is a very good theory is for the simple fact that it would make sense for her to want to stay with the X-Men in that situation. The reason being because Avengers tried to do that to her, remember? That was one of the things that happened in Avengers when they actually was trying to like keep her in. So like, but telling her that we're protecting you, but literally she was like a prisoner where she couldn't leave with Vision. Remember, that was one of the things that they actually did. So that could actually be a theory because that is one of the theories that something like that was going on with them, which on one of the videos that I was watching when it was speaking about Storm and possibly Storm's links to Wakanda. I mean,
something else we need to get into. Yep.
Yeah, did we touch on that already?
No, we'll touch on that in a second. I've written it down.
Okay, I'll leave that for now then. But I'll say why, what's going to lead up to what in terms of that based on those theories as well.
Yeah, I'm just shooting on this theory now because I really like it now. And if this doesn't happen, I'm going to be so upset because essentially you've got the Avengers who to a certain degree are going to be funded and kind of controlled by the government. Whereas you've got the X-Men who are going to be very much a kind of like their own thing. They're like not attached to any kind of statutorial organization. So it would be a really good kind of premise where you've got this kind of government-led organization who just want to take care of the threat, and the threat is Wanda, who poses a worldwide threat. Whereas the X-Men are like, no, you don't understand Wanda. She's one of us, and we're going to help her control her powers. And, you're not going to take her from us. I would really like to, because it would be such a moral quandary. Because
we're not going to let you because we see how the government treats people who they feel is different.
But then you could see it from both angles, couldn't you? You could also see it from the Avengers angle, kind of like, well, we don't care. We just want to save the universe. I'm not saying I agree with that, but you could see it from that angle as well.
Yeah, they have to do it really well where the Avengers will also look like the good guy. Reason being is because Sam has that thing about him where despite how scummy the American government and the military, the army has been, he's still one of them, despite everything that's happened.
Yeah.
And he will be that guy that will do it or whatever. And I think you'll have that battle where they'll be like, well, Steve Rogers would have, as much as he's a, for a country and glory guy, he would still think for himself and do that. And that might make Sam feel triggered where he's trying to say, I'm a puppet. And again, that would make him like, no, this is our stand. We feel that this is the right way because we all see it. In those kind of situations, the government always feels like what they're doing is the right thing. They're doing it for everyone. I'm going to chop your legs off, but it's not for my own good. It's for your own good. It's for America's good. And they're like, no, it's not. And that's going to lead to,
Exactly. So you could set that up initially by having like a Dark Avengers story led by Jonathan Walker, US agent, as well, which would be really interesting.
At the end of the day, sorry, many people. At the end of the day, US agent really has to kind of chill out because the fact that
I'm not going to attempt to chill out. He'll probably chop my head off with a shield.
Yeah, but the fact that he got beat down by the Wakandan women. I mean, we know they're not regular women, but they are regular human, and
Yeah,
they
but now
just
he's got
jumped
that.
on
Now
him.
he's got that super soldier serum running through his veins.
Do you think they're afraid of him with the super soldier serum?
I don't mean in terms of Dawn Millard. I just think in general, though, he's going to be a far bigger threat than what we saw in the Falcon and Winter Soldier
Yeah,
series.
but at the same time, Manny, in the Falcon and Winter Soldier series, they were just joking and toying with him. They didn't really want to hurt him. Let's be real. If they wanted to hurt him,
I'm not talking about him facing the Dawn Millard. I just mean in general, he's going to be a far
yeah,
bigger
that's
threat.
what I'm saying. So every time he thinks about trying to be a tough guy and he wants to take on the X-Men, he needs to remember that energy, what that led to with the Dora Milaje, what they done to him.
Unfortunately, I think we all know that
He
John
still
Walker
wakes
is.
up in cold sweat.
I think we all know that John Walker is not a humble man, unfortunately, and he doesn't take on these life lessons too well. I've actually switched to a blue light because I'm now switching over to the X-Men Blue team for the end of this podcast.
He's a funny guy, bless him.
But yeah, so my brother mentioned Madripoor, which is really interesting because when Madripoor first featured in Falcon and Winter Soldier, I lost my shit.
Sorry,
because
I have to ask you this question. It's a quick one though. Do you think
make it relevant?
John Walker, it's just I'm just wondering, based on how you know how John Walker lied to what's his name's family?
Yeah, Lamar Hoskins' family. Yes,
Lamar's family. Yeah. Do you think he probably lied when he went home to his missus about what happened with the Dora Milaje? Like, yeah, babe, I took on these Wakandans and I handled it.
Yeah, probably. He's that kind of guy. He'll probably just never mentioned it. It never happens.
All right, you can go back to your theory now. I was just wondering about him.
Never happened. So yeah, I mean, I totally lost it because Madripoor is very much a Wolverine focal point in his stories. Wolverine often pops up in Madripoor to carry out his adventures. He is called Patch in Madripoor. So I was really excited. I was really hoping someone was going to mention Patch. One of the bars they actually walk past, I think it's the Princess Bar in Falcon and Winter Soldier. That's actually the bar which Wolverine drinks in the comics. So I was like, oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, I was watching that one of those Easter egg theory where it's things you may have missed. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are dropping hints that they're going to feature, and as well the Shang-Chi movies might feature in Madripoor as well. So
are those movies or is it a series?
It's a movie. The Shang-Chi movie might actually feature in Madripoor. So again, just watch out for any kind of references to Wolverine. If you see like a big burly dude called Roughhouse walking around Madripoor, that's a Wolverine villain. Take note. A few comments. John Walker, a US agent, will be a demented villain with no intention. He can go that way. Brother says, if they reboot the Netflix Marvel shows, other supers, Jessica Jones, so mutants will exist as well. Possibly. But yeah, let's just go on to Wakanda. Because my brother, who's actually Kenyan, who's actually born in Kenya, he's very adamant to let people know that Storm is Kenyan, Aurora Monroe.
Yeah, I told you this in my. Did I send you that theory?
Yeah, send me the video. There's theory, but the theory is that I'm going to upset my brother here because my brother obviously wants some Kenyan representation in the MCU. The end game apparently for Black Panther was to have eventually Storm and T'Challa get together, apparently, as they do in the comics. Obviously, that's now impossible with T'Challa, Chadwick passing. But there is a theory there that it might actually write Storm as a Wakandan and not a Kenyan. I'm not too keen on that, I have to say. I want her to be Kenyan as well.
Well, they could do it both ways, in the sense that saying that she's a Wakandan because they took her in, but when she speaks of her background, she's like, yes, I'm from Kenya,
Yeah,
but
that could work. Yeah.
I was also, I spent my time, because it's the same, like, someone who's migrated from one country to the next, especially from a young age. And even though you may now have a new passport, when you do speak of your history, you'll be like, yeah, oh yeah, I'm English, but I was born in so and so. So you're still paying homage and respect to your native land, your birthright.
Yeah, no, that could work. That could work. So I've just got to go back to normal lighting. That was annoying me. Yeah.
So that will work. They can do it exactly that way, because she does have that look, like she's done some. Thank you, Bavik. Because she's done some training. She's got some serious. Yeah, as a goddess. Yeah, I told you. That's why Thor had the little issue.
So she was worshipped as a goddess in Kenya. So I think that needs to be picked up in some way, shape, or form, that she is a goddess of some kind. Because I feel as though she's Wakandan, she could just be relegated to just another Wakandan. So I do hope they kind of put emphasis on the fact that she was treated as a goddess. But as well in the comics as well, she ends up in Egypt somehow as well as a child, being a pickpocket. So like she does travel around Africa quite a bit during her younger years.
Isn't one of the theory that her parents died, and that's how she met T'Challa, based on the video I sent you? She met T'Challa when he was being kidnapped, and he was like 13, while she was in Kenya.
Oh God!
And that's how they met, and they roamed the streets together for a while, and then he obviously went back and did T'Challa things, and they reconnected older, as grown folks and whatnot. So again, it can still be that. So she could have the training, because let's face it, he would have been learning to fight from he was young, and if they did spend any time together, it would only be practical that he would have been teaching her hand-to-hand combat based on what he would have already learned, because he would have been an advanced warrior even as a child.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it does get a bit convoluted because we still got the Nakia character, Lupita's character as well in Wakanda. And apparently
it did make sense, because remember, they did lose touch, so it's not going to take away anything from that. They did lose touch where he went back, so it makes sense that in that timeline when she's gone off and he's gone back to Wakanda, he and Lupita's character, they all connected, and he had that life and that relationship, blah blah blah, whatever. And it could be a case of, if God rest his soul, if he was still around and they went on that theory, it could have been a case of, even though he did love Lupita's character, he would have been still like, well, the reason why it never worked was because his heart was always somewhere else.
Yeah.
His first love, which is Storm. So yeah, that could work.
Which we'll never see come to fruition. Right, let's just park Black Panther, because I think next week we're going to talk more in depth about Black Panther. Because we've got to talk about something while Loki isn't on our screens.
We can do it the week after. We still got one more episode of this.
Let's give ourselves 2 weeks to research further the X-Men.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. But I think we've near enough covered everything I wanted to cover. I think, just to round off with, I'm quite liking this kind of Eternals, the Celestials kind of inputted the mutant gene into humanity, and now for whatever reason, whether it be the blip, whether it be Wanda, something's going to happen that activates it, or maybe they've always been living underground as the Morlocks, and maybe Professor X took a few of those guys in. By the way, if they ever done the Morlock massacre in the MCU, I'd be very surprised if Disney done that story.
Well, they could do, because
to depict the genocide on the TV screens. It'll be very. I hope they do. It'll be very brave of them.
If they're doing Deadpool and keeping Deadpool where it's still R-rated with certain things, they could make that. They could do a mixture with the films.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited. Whatever happens, I have full trust in Kevin Feige to do the right thing. Sorry, I've got my bin bag full of my recycling behind me. I really should have moved that before we started. I've just noticed it's in the background.
Should do like me, have a wall that's a safe space.
Yeah, I can't.
Nothing there but the switch.
The way my room is set up, I can't really do that, unfortunately. But yeah, anything you want to end with before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I think, thank you all for tuning in. And I think as we're all avid Marvel fans and we love this, I think, like Manny says, we do this week after next, we'll continue with part 2 of, integrating mutants into the MCU. So I think we should all do some research and we should all come back with all different theories and, have another amazing session where we just speak on that.
Indeed.
And lead to a great segue for the following week. We could actually do
Invincibles is on my list, Cake.
Okay. I watched it. I watched it already. I watched all the. I'm telling him he needs to watch it. It's absolutely amazing.
Such a sucker.
And it's just, I watched it. Also watched that. Yasuke, the first Black Samurai, which is on Netflix. Yeah, that was. Oh
really? Okay. Yeah. I might put that lower down on my list then, if that's the case.
Well, it's a quick watch anyway, because the first episode is like 45 minutes, and then the next 5 episodes, it's a 6-parter. It's like 30 minutes long, 28 minutes. So you can watch it. I watched it because I started it and I was like, okay, I'll finish it, but. What I was expecting and what it was like.
Yep. Sorry. Carry on.
But Invincible, it is unreal. Literally, it is unreal when you actually just watch it.
There's another thing I need to watch as well. Just released on Disney, The Bad Batch, Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Yeah. So it's basically about the clones. And basically, what happens to them? It's an animated.
Funny enough, as you're speaking about Star Wars, I saw a theory of what they're making. The possibly next Star Wars movie they were going to be making is going to have what's her name, Rosario Dawson. Awesome. Yeah, she won't be playing Yoda.
This isn't Yoda. This is Grogu.
Same thing.
It's not the same
Yoda,
thing.
Grogu, all look the same. Little short dude, cute but deadly.
Davey, you're being Star Wars racist now.
Yeah, my bad, Yoda.
Grogu,
same thing. I mess up the name. Remember, I used to call the Flag Smasher something else. What did I used to call them for about 2 weeks?
I'm not even sure anymore.
Yeah, exactly, but I didn't call them what they were. And let's not forget about poor John Walker, what I used to call him.
Yes, well, that's just insulting to Paul John. But yeah, Grogu says watch The Bad Batch as well.
I'll check that out. But yeah, Rosario Dawson's going to play that
Ahsoka.
Female Jedi. Yes.
So if you watch Clone Wars and if you watch Star Wars Rebels, they're great series. And if you watch them, Ahsoka eventually becomes your favorite Jedi. She's amazing. She's by far and away the best Jedi Star Wars have ever made, and it's great casting.
I still like Anakin. I still like Anakin.
Well, watch Clone Wars and Rebels, and then come back to me. She's actually Anakin's Padawan in Clone Wars.
Oh, so is this before the massacre?
Yeah, and it even covers what she's up to during the massacre as well.
So did she survive?
Well, yes, because obviously, yeah.
No, I don't know if that's before.
Yeah. So
she survived. Because remember they all killed like the Jedi's, like
Okay, so you need to go away and watch The Mandalorian, so you can meet Grogu and stop calling him Yoda.
Yeah.
You need to go. So you need to go and watch Clone Wars, watch Rebels, then watch The Mandalorian in that order.
So Clone Wars. Actually, text me them in the right order.
Okay,
Getting
cool.
old. Text me them in the right order now, so I can I'll start now. It's a sunny day.
It's all on Disney. It's all on Disney.
Yeah.
So we're going to go now. But if in the comics, or you can just message me directly. If there's any other ideas about mutants in the MCU, contact me directly or leave in the comments or whatever, and I will bring them up in 2 weeks' time.
Yes. So do your research. We'll be back. And Davie P out. Duke.
Grogu says bye as well.
Bye, Yoda.